Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Wandering Road podcast. Once again, I'm your co host, Dean, alongside my stalwart host, Chris, who is the leader of this podcast, and he's been so gracious enough to let me spearhead this one today.
You
So
refer to me
today,
as Caesar.
I will, Caesar. Okay. Don't cut off my other ball, please. I need at least one. Okay, so today we're going to be talking with author and actually triple threat. He's got a lot of stuff going on, but we're talking primarily about his books today. We're going to get into some good discussion. Please welcome to the show, Aaron Ryan. How's it going, Aaron?
It's going well, thank you. Boy, triple threat. That's
Yeah.
so flattering. I mean, from the start of the interview. Hopefully it's still triple by the end of the interview, and I haven't like diluted any of those threats.
No, man. I think like based off of like your background and how long you've been at the game and the depth of stuff that you've written, it's all really fascinating. And well, actually, the first thing I want to just give an opportunity to you is just the floor is open, man. Like, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, maybe where you're from, and all that stuff.
It's a really long story. So finer points. Born in '73, grew up in around Snoqualmie, Washington, so way off east of Seattle, where no one knows where it is. I knew I wanted to be something creative when I was a kid. I remember getting an assignment in second grade, and the teacher had us all write, this whatever, just a creative writing assignment. I wrote a story called The Electric Boy, and it's really funny that I had an epiphany while writing Forecast. I actually sat back and went, oh my gosh, I'm actually, 45 years later, I'm writing The Electric Boy. So it's amazing how it became full circle that way. But I wrote that, and it was just kind of opened my eyes to creative writing. And then I read The Lord of the Rings, and it was like, man, this is amazing to be able to do this. It is the undisputed heavyweight of the creative sci-fi fantasy realm. And I've done a lot of creative things in my lifetime. They've all really revolved around storytelling. Right now I'm on two parallel tracks. One is a voiceover artist where I tell other people's stories, and I'm an author. I prefer this track over here, the author track, where I get to tell my own stories. But they're both great.
That's so exciting, man. Like you're literally living the life that I want to live. I guess I'm still young enough to kind of go down that path, but I totally like your story about being creative and finding that out later on in life and looking back and stuff. I feel that the same way. And isn't it kind of funny, Chris, you've talked about this before as well with creating this podcast where you kind of go through life a little bit knowing deep down that you got something, but you're not really sure what it is. And I think what we hold on to for so many years is like this idea that we're not good enough. Like, oh man, like I think I'm a good writer or I think I'm a good orator, but then you don't really apply it and practice it and exercise it. And that's what it really takes to bring it out. But then when you get over that threshold, Chris and I talk about this all the time where it's like, we got on this podcast. We were so shitty at talking to people for a long time, for many years, like, probably like giving the worst, presentations in school for a long time. But then after we started doing this, we just felt more comfortable talking and just talking to
Yeah.
people we've never met. It comes so fluidly.
Aaron, you said the magic word for me. Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings. I saw your reaction. Oh yeah. I knew it was
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah.
And I want to clarify. So I know this is audio only, but just so you guys can see, I am wearing the ring around my necklace here. It's got my family's names inscribed on the inside. It's not the one ring. See, I'm still here. Still here. Still here. But it is, I'm a dork, like certifiable dork, and I love the Lord of the Ring. This is my red leather bound, foil stamped, all in one version of the Lord of the Rings that I created. It's got pictures of the
Wow.
movies at the appropriate junctures. I love this. I mean,
Yeah.
this was a labor of love. So that's all I'll show.
Yeah. While we're on the topic of writing and creative, like that's exactly why we created this podcast. Well, I first started it solo. And it was kind of okay, what do I want to talk about? I don't really know what I want to talk about. So let me just, everybody has their dumbass opinions out there, have all these podcasts out there. I'm like, you know what? Let me throw my shit into the ether and see if it sticks. And that's how this started. And then I started doing paranormal stuff because I'm like huge into paranormal, as you can tell by the nature
Probably
of our
why I'm
show.
here.
Yeah, and big on aliens, ghosts, demons, and stuff like that. I was so inspired by Tolkien and the way that he writes and he builds his world and his descriptions.
He gets accused of that far too often. His world building is just absolutely unmatched, and people Yeah, I'll never forget my uncle, who I don't really like much anyway, but this just propelled him way down into the, the detestable rank. Uncle Danny said, like, hey, God, he just takes in half an hour to describe a rock. And I'm just like, you have no idea how much work it takes to put into that. This world was absolutely real to him, and he wanted it to be real to you. And if you're taking a nature walk and you walk around and appreciate things, you're going to note them too and go, look at that grass just curls and wraps around the blah blah blah, the clementine and the nasturtiums and all these flowers that he observes and the wildlife and all that. His
Yeah.
world building was and is absolutely unmatched. So I appreciate it. Some people don't. They want to get right to the action and, hey, let's have swords and gunfights and all that.
Yeah.
I think you're skipping one of the most fundamental parts of a sci-fi fantasy story.
Yeah. No offense to Harry Potter people, but like that's the one thing that I see about
Okay.
them. Well, it's too difficult to get into. And one thing I'll say before we continue, I didn't mean to derail the conversation to go down the Tolkien path, but Rings of Power is the biggest fucking abomination known to man. It's not about who was cast as the characters, what they look like, or anything like that. The writing was atrocious. You try to retcon everything that he wrote, fucking
Yeah.
having Gandalf come down on a meteor,
Yeah,
including
exactly.
Tom Bombadil, who looks
Yeah.
nothing like Tom Bombadil. It looks like the dude got a costume from Party City.
Yeah.
In the Second Age, the Harfoots were not around in the Second Age. You
Mhm.
compressed 3,000 years of important history into 20 episodes. Like it makes absolutely no sense.
And,
Yeah.
and this is where we find out that Aaron wrote a little bit of that. He kind of guest wrote. He's like, oh, by the way, I was on that.
Yeah, I wrote the first episode. Yeah.
I wrote the first episode.
I haven't received any royalty checks for that. If those are coming, please let me know, because I would love those. News to me, pal. But I do derive so much of my inspiration and my tactics for how I approach world building to Tolkien for that reason. And there are two chapters in Lord of the Rings that were so formative to how I actually go about world building. One of them is the Council of Elrond, when all of this history is brought to the fore from so many different perspectives. The people who are representatives of all the different races of Middle Earth are present. And Gandalf, of course, has the lion's share of the story, but you've got Eristor and Círdan the Shipwright, and then you've got Gimli or Glóin, and all of these things brought to the present from their perspective, the past leading to the present. I love that kind of stuff. Also, the shadow of the past, when Gandalf sits down with Frodo at Bag End and explains to him what happened, back in the early years. I love that kind of stuff because it lays the groundwork for a much broader story. Then this book that you're holding is a story still. I mean, it's a standalone story, but it has, talons that reach way back and roots that reach way back through time that give you this such a broader story. And just to cover what Chris said about Rings of Power, now I agree with you, and I will also go, for me, any chance to set foot in Middle Earth is very exciting, but it does need to be at least close to canon, preferably canon, but at least close to canon. I'm not a fan of Tom Bombadil. Gandalf did not arrive on a meteor. He arrived in the Grey Havens with the other wizards and Radagast and the Blue Wizards, and he met Círdan the Shipwright there and was given his ring then.
Yep.
He didn't kind of go on this, journey of discovery with the help of a hobbit. I understand why they did some of the things they did, but far too much artistic license has been taken. So I get it. For my book, Dissonance Volume 1 Reality, has been adapted for the screen. It's being pitched to streaming networks. It's actually really close to the book as far as the screenplay goes. And for that, I'm really grateful. It's something I would insist on.
Man, I hope we can watch
That's
that
awesome.
someday.
Yeah,
That'd be awesome.
Hope so
I hope it
too.
gets picked up.
But okay, so let's give Aaron a chance to kind of pivot to his works. The first one I want to talk about is Forecast. As you describe it, it's a historical revisionist fiction. What's the concept, and like what were you getting at this particular work?
Forecast was a really difficult project for me to write for a number of reasons. Number one, I had just finished writing, I think, the third novel in the Dissonance trilogy before it became a hexalogy. I just finished writing the trilogy, and so I need a new idea. So I start writing this Forecast idea, and I absolutely knew that I wanted it to be a historical fiction novel, revisionist fiction where a character who lives, there's no time travel involved, but a character who lives and breathes in September of 2001 in Jersey City, across the Hudson from Manhattan, is able to eventually avert 9/11 entirely. I knew I wanted that basic premise. How I was going to go about it, I had zero idea, because I'm a pantser writer. There's planners, and then there's pantsers who fly by the seat of their pants. And I'm far more a pantser, much more organic as far as how the story evolves and how the characters thread their way to their destination. I knew that I wanted to undo 9/11 was my ultimate goal. However, Dissonance has been so incredibly captivating for me, and there was a huge world there of material remaining to be mined. Boy, every time I would try to return to Forecast, another novel of Dissonance kept calling. It was like an umbilical cord or a tether, just kept, sucking me right back into the Dissonance
Wow.
vortex. So I wrote 3 more novels of Dissonance before I finally came back and said, I am done with Dissonance. Let us finish Forecast now. And it practically wrote itself. It just was so, when I get a good story, it's going to tell itself, and it's just going to keep going. And there's nothing I can do to slow it down. 9/11 is of still monumental importance to me. It's incredibly sacred. It is a date that never should have happened. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't care for your conspiracy theories. Anyone who's out there, I believe it happened as it did. Did people make mistakes? Sure. But ultimately, it's something that we need to remember, always remember, and never forget the heroes and fallen victims of 9/11, including those aboard United 93, including all the 343 firefighters and 42, I believe it was, FDN or NYPD and the Port Authority workers, and all the other countless volunteers and those who have died down the years because of carcinogens and things they've inhaled from the site. So my character is struck by lightning. He's a weatherman, so of course he gets struck by lightning. And he is then able to receive images from the future that have been slingshot around the sun of future atrocities. He needs to be near the person who is going to commit the atrocity before he can start feeling and receiving those signals and those wavelengths. So, hot flashes, bloody nose. He sees the images flash before his mind and essentially starts seeing everything that we have seen over 20 years of history and all of the footage from 9/11. He starts seeing all of that before any of it has happened. He starts tailing Mohammed Atta, who is the lead hijacker of 9/11, and then all of the others really come into play, and he starts tailing them and figuring out what's going on. I don't want to spoil it, but there's no other way I can other than he is able to eventually prevent 9/11. How he goes about doing it, though, is really an inception mind bender. And I couldn't believe what I wrote when I was done. Like, holy cow, did I write this? I mean, it's wicked cool how he goes about and does it. So I'm very proud of the work.
That's awesome, and I wanna kinda touch on real world examples because what was the catalyst and what was the driver? I mean, I understand the 9/11 concept, but there seems to be an aspect in this story that's very heavily focused on the concept of predestiny. Can we change, our fates? Or is there such a thing as fate even? Is it kinda, or are we kind of just, like, tethered to, how things unfold in the natural universe? Is there, so what I don't know, what's your, like, just really quickly, like, what's your take on what is really happening in our reality when it comes to stuff like this? Do you think it really
Yeah.
happens? So
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's a worthy question. Dane, you have been deemed worthy. You have been found worthy. So in Jurassic Park, Ian Malcolm, played by Jeff Goldblum, says to Ellie Sattler, I think her last name was Sattler in Jurassic Park. He said, "A butterfly can flap its wings in Central Park, and in Peking you'll get rain instead of sunshine." And I love that chaos theory explanation. Is little things that you do can affect this and that. And we've all watched movies where you do something backward in time that disrupts the time-space continuum. Back to the Future covers that ad nauseum or ad infinitum. There's nothing nauseous about that series. It's a great wholesome series, but ad infinitum, it's covered. And so you have to question, if you do something here, what bearings will it have over there? What effect will your cause render? He knows what's going to happen, but how he has to go about preventing it from happening is dangerous. And do we venture into that, where angels fear to tread? Do we venture into that dangerous ground to avert something that we've seen and prevent it and save lives, knowing full well that our actions could actually end up bringing it about, whereas it might not have ever happened? And you see that as you travel through the story with the protagonist, Roland, who is named after my best friend. What's up, Roland? You see that. He's got morality and ethical dilemmas he's got to wrestle through. And what he does is going to have bearings on not just 9/11, but his relationships, people who are alive or not, people who are this name or that name or live here or there. And someone somewhere behind the scenes is jerking some strings and moving things around on a giant chessboard based on what happens. I don't want to spoil it, any further than that, but it's a great game of trust, really. It's a great game of trust.
I think we've talked in the past about, especially in our more sciencey episodes, where kind of marry up the idea of like the paranormal and what's going on in that side of possibility for existence, but then also the scientific and mathematical points of existence, like string theory and stuff like that, and really like talking about if human beings are part of the third dimensional world in such a way that we're literally we're emerging from the natural world, and if the natural world in the most finite, broken down pieces, like say in string theory, then it seems like you could make the argument that everything is going to play out the way it's supposed to, even if it doesn't seem to us like it is or not. But yet we
Yeah.
have this supposed awareness, this self-awareness, right? Like consciousness. And I think there was like a panel, like Neil deGrasse Tyson and some other famous physicist and like a very famous psychologist or psychiatrist, like they were discussing free will, and they had some really interesting concepts. But I guess that's my last question for you on this topic before we pivot to dissonance. Do you think that free will is real? Is it a real thing, or
Oh, yeah.
are we at our core just kind of driven by the nature of reality?
No, I think it's absolutely very much real. And that's why you have all kinds of people disagreeing with others. Calamities happen, man-made calamities. I mean, look at what happened just New Year's Eve with all of the atrocities that are committed there. And every place needs a Roland because everyone operates on their own. It's the autonomy that makes us unique. It is the non conformity that makes us all differentiated from each other. So chaos theory, butterfly effect, string theory. I mean, I'm still working on my string cheese theory, by the way. All of those things, they're all so different and they're also at play. But free will is what makes us human. Free will is what my son, when I talk to him about, he's 8, so he's learning all kinds of things, and he says, "Dad, I don't want you to be mad, but I don't like this." And whatever it is, and it's like steak or something that's just so silly that everyone likes. Like, you got to be kidding me. What are you, a vegetarian? And he says, "I don't like this," and I'm sorry because I know you do. And I'm going, "Honey, it's absolutely okay. You don't have to like steak. I like steak, but that's what makes me unique." And you don't, and that's what makes you weird and an outcast. Get out of here. And it's like it's what makes him unique.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. I think ultimately with forecast, I didn't want to dive too heavily into the psychological issues behind it, except by implication, implying here and there the moral dilemma. But ultimately, he has to make some decisions whether or not to even be involved. He regrets being struck by lightning. He regrets having this cursed vision. He regrets being in this predicament, and how does he find his way out? But then he owns, as any good protagonist does, they go on a character arc. He owns his situation, and he says, "I'm going to do some good with it," and he doesn't. In the end, he does great with it instead.
Right.
So again, it just turned out fantastic, way better than I could have hoped for.
Aaron, I wanted to ask you this question, touching back on the concept of free will. I too believe in, free will. That's what makes us unique. I view it in the sense that if you look at life as PG, like Skyrim, for example, there are tons and tons of quests and tons of different things that you could do, but it's up to you as the player to determine how you get to the end point of the game. But my
Right?
question for you is, what are your thoughts on predestination? That things are predetermined. Doesn't that kind of negate our free will? Like if you are predestined to die on X day, on X year, doesn't matter what you do, you are going to die of in this form and fashion. Doesn't matter how healthy you are, doesn't matter how like unhealthy you are. Like, what are your thoughts on that concept?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it actually forces me, and it would force many people, into the realm of faith, because predestination is a great element of disagreement and discussion in the faith community. And so, as a believer, I'm a believer in Jesus. I believe I'm a Christian. I believe in all of this stuff, and I believe in predestination as well. There are people in the Bible, for example, who were predestined, and the biggest one that comes to mind is Judas. Was Judas a bad guy from the very beginning? I mean, who knows? I don't think that he was. I think he went on a journey of discovery with Jesus and said, hey, you're not doing what I expect you to do. So I'm going to go to these guys and talk to them, and I'm going to turn you in. In God's eyes, he was predestined to do that. I fully believe that he was the one. God needed somebody to do this. God needed somebody to betray Jesus and bring this story about. So in that sense, he was predestined. I think was Hitler predestined? I don't know about that necessarily, because that's something where you can just become so deluded that you're going to do what you're going to do, and you're going to hurt a lot of people that way. Predestination tends to buck up, though, with the idea of free will, because free will says I can do whatever I want. Predestination says I have to do what they want, or what he wants, or what she wants. And so when it comes to forecast, predestination is not a factor in that. It's, we're looking back, we have that luxury of looking back and going, we already know 9/11 happened. This guy could have easily walked away from 9/11, as could Judas have, but God would have found somebody else, I think. So without diving into the faith realm too much, I mean, I know that's controversial too. I just think that with predestination, you can have players in history that are needed to accomplish something, but then everybody else is going to go around and they're going to do their own free will thing and figure out, we're all trying to find our way through life, right? But some guys are guided through life through a variety of circumstances, and I mean, whatever those are is really up to them and their narrative, but they are guided to do certain things and say certain things and think certain things. Is that predestination? I don't know. Could it maybe fall in that column? Sure. Some of it is just still up for interpretation, I think.
Yeah, that's totally fair. That's a good point. Okay, so let's pivot to this huge 6-book series that Aaron has written called Dissonance. This one is absolutely fascinating. Like, you have not only a range of depth across these different books, you also have, like, it seems like you have timelines, because you're starting in the beginning and it's kind of like a growing thing. And the other thing I find interesting about this book, I don't know if you could probably give me other examples of how this has been done before in fiction, but I think it's fascinating that you've married up post-apocalyptia and survival with the concept of aliens. So people have done that before. It's hard, if you have like an alien invasion in fiction, it makes sense that of course you can't have a story without humans fighting back, but you
Right.
kind of take it over a long time period. And that kind of gives me like, I hope this isn't the wrong thing to say, but like, kind of give like a Walking Dead or even like a Game of Thrones kind of feel, where like
Yeah.
people kind of like come into the equation, maybe they die, they come out. Some people like maybe are good, they turn bad, or vice versa. And there's like, I can't wait to talk about this story in depth, but why don't you give us like a synopsis of the story and tell us about the aspects of Dissonance?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I think that Chris is going to resonate with this line. It's the long defeat. I mean, that's straight out of Lord of the Rings, and you're fighting this long defeat. So ultimately, what I did is I seriously wanted to write a single book. It ballooned into a trilogy, because there were 4 chapters into number one. I realized there's a greater subtext going on here. There's another story that is a subtle undercurrent running below this surface line narrative, and I had to mine that as well, and it just blew up into a story that's greater than aliens. Mankind is always the worst enemy of mankind. We always know that. Just always boils down to that, and we get in each other's way. This ends up going in that direction as well, and then we're fighting a war on 2 fronts. But the synopsis is in 2026, we're going about our lives. These things suddenly drift down out of the sky one day by the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands. They're all over the planet. So they're not crafts or drones or ships or probes. We fly our own drones up to them and see what they are. They're beings. And they hang there in the sky all over the planet at a geostationary orbit 50 feet above the ground for 90 days. I mean, during that time, stock markets crashing, suicides, people selling things off, typical hysteria results. We're going, friend or foe, what is this? Why are you here? And why are you just hanging there? We think maybe they're angelic messengers because they haven't attacked, and all will be revealed, at some point. Well, that was June 6th, 2026. So we have a little time. We're safe still. You guys can just relax. Don't pack yet. But they hang there for 90 days. September 3rd rolls around, and they all at the same time all over the planet wake up. They start stretching, start jetting out this bluish greenish mist. They look down at us and they hiss. And it really just all goes south after that. So if it's coordinated, they've all waited for this moment and they've woken up at the same time all over the planet. They are apex predators. They're not here for any kind of illumination or sharing of knowledge. They're simply predatorial in nature. And so within 3 months, 85% of all mankind has been killed off, and the rest are living underground in these fortified military bunkers called blockades. We call them Gorgons. We end up calling them Gorgons because, like Medusa the Gorgon, you cannot, under any circumstances, look them in the eye. One look and it's all over. They have a telepathic paralytic. So they're not going to turn you to stone, but they are going to immobilize you telepathically. You're going to basically tense up and freeze, and you can't move, and you can't talk, and you can't think. But then they're going to come eat you at their leisure, and you're going to feel every agonizing bite while they do that. So awful. Don't take pictures of aliens. Please just run. I don't know why we sit there and ooh, ah. Volume 1 was told from the perspective of a 23-year-old Army sergeant 16 years after the invasion. He has, reminiscences and reveries of remembering what happened during those years. It leads up to a massive counterstrike where we find and weaponize technology that they actually brought with them. So it's their Achilles heel. We kill them all off at the end of 2042. I mean, spoiler, I know, but happy ending. And then I wrote 2 prequels. The prequels are told from the protagonist in the trilogy. The prequels are told from his dad's perspective when he's just 6 years old. So you're there when they arrive. You're there when they activate. And believe me, when they wake up and they start to attack in Volume 0, Revelation, that is singly the most terrifying thing that I've ever written. And I needed to kind of take a nap and suck my thumb and take a break after that because it's terrifying. What I wrote is terrifying. Then you follow them, down through the years in the 2 prequels leading up to Volume 1, and it just brings you full circle. Minutes pass in between each novel, minutes or days, not months or years. So they're very cohesive. And then I wrote a sequel where a second wave comes in 2045 after the first wave has been destroyed. The second wave is going, hey, where are you? We don't hear you. What happened to you? And so they send another craft to investigate, and we take them out too. But it plays like a CTU Jack Bauer 24 episode, the sequel. It is the deepest, most thematically deep and passionate thing I've ever written. I'm super excited about the screenplay, and it sells pretty well. So I'm grateful, man.
I'm the type of person that sometimes, to my own detriment, when someone's telling a story, it plays like a movie in my head.
I do want to ask real quick, and this is actually because Mr. Chris here is a double history major, history buff fanatic. I looked up Gorgons, but it's actually Greek mythology, so it is based in history.
It is,
at least on the mythological side. And like you said earlier, there's an air of like Medusa, which I think most people probably know about Medusa. The Gorgons, they also have a similar characteristic like Medusa did, where they can turn people to stone. The difference is they were daughters of 2 gods, I think, and yeah, and I wonder, and again, we could feel free to let us know to cut this out. I'm just curious, but in your story, did you kind of have that idea in your head about the mythical side that was already out there? Because
well, here's an image from the cover of the book, just FYI. That kind of looks like
nice.
maybe a space octopus would be a good way to describe it there. But
Yeah, okay.
this is ultimately, I found this artwork, not this, he actually created this for me, but I found the artwork online that looked even more terrifying than that. I needed something to kind of be the epitome of what was circulating in my head and what I was ruminating on. When I first wrote the initial passages of Volume 1 Reality, they were called Druids. The enemy was called Druids. I didn't quite know what shape they were going to take. It initially represented something that was more of a fusion between Nazgul and Dementors. And I thought, done. That's not new. That's not unique. And that no one's going to be excited about that. They're just going to scream at you and you're going to get terrified, but anybody can scream at anybody. I needed something that was going to pose the quandary. You can't even look at this being that you're fighting. You're shadow boxing. I've got my eyes closed. You're shadow boxing and hoping that your punches are going to land. They're definitely biological. They are flesh and bone. Just like us, they're just from another planet and out there in the universe, which you don't really find out about their origins until Volume 4. And I love that. I love that suspense and the mystery there. You still don't know everything about them, but I realized that I didn't want to do anything that had been done before, like vis-a-vis Nazguls or Nazgul. Sorry, Chris. No S for the plurality of it, or the Dementors. Cardinal sin, right? I just needed something unique, but I was like, what terrifies me? What is the thing that I can remember being a visceral terror from my youth? And I went, I know. I remember in 1981, Clash of the Titans came out. It was Harry Hamlin played Perseus. It was Burgess Meredith who played his mentor, Rocky's mentor in Rocky. You've got the Greek mythology. You've got the gods all at play, Zeus and Athena and Aphrodite and all of them. When he goes to sever Medusa's head, that's the only thing that they can use to stop the Kraken. I'll never forget being a little guy and seeing that claymation stop motion photography Medusa slither off the stage and come into view, and she shoots her arrow, knocks one of Perseus's henchmen down. He's not a bad guy, so it's not a henchman, but one of his warriors down, and freezes him. But she comes into frame, and her eyes just glow green, and there's this high dissonant shriek. You like that? Dissonant? There's this high dissonant shriek paired with just this clashing note that plays. And I remember running out of the room. I was like, and I just, little guy scampered out of the room. It was so terrifying. And I didn't want to be turned to stone. So I thought, what if I could incorporate something like that into these creatures that have this telepathic ability to immobilize you? They're unique that way. It's not something that you've seen or read before.
Chris, I know you're probably a little too young to remember this, but I grew up in a time where I kind of remember Clash of the Titans flying around. I grew up, I was born in the late 80s, so like that was a little bit after the time it came out, but
What
I
year
do
were you born?
remember
87, 88?
87, yeah.
Yeah, you're just
Yeah, I
3
was
years
born in
older than
87.
me.
Okay. Well, okay,
Yeah.
so maybe have you ever heard of
I
Clash of the
watched it.
Titans?
Oh, yeah.
You watched it when you're younger? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
But I pulled up the image of Medusa from the 1981 Clash of the Titans, and holy
Yeah.
shit. That is like I cannot imagine being a preteen or like a young kid and just seeing that on the screen up close, like glowing eyes green. If you're listening to this and you have a computer, go type in Medusa Clash of the Titans original, and it's like the first image, 1981. It's a pretty damn good representation of something terrifying for the early 80s, honestly.
Yep. Yeah, it's frightening. I mean, she grimaces when she is hypnotizing him and turning him to stone. She grimaces and she's got a sneer that has one corner of her mouth up like
Yes.
this,
Yeah.
and you got to watch the YouTube video of it. It's really just
Yeah.
like, ugh.
Subtle, but yeah. That's really cool though that something so significant, like it's a blip in your history, but it was so significant that it really drove
It
a
was
lot of your creativity for the novel
it
series.
was visceral. It was very visceral back then.
Yeah,
I'll never forget that.
that's so cool. Aaron, like what do you think about all the alien stuff going on, the disclosure? We've like Chris and I have talked so much about this, like you've said ad infinitum, like so much, but we never run out of interesting topics to talk about with the alien stuff. You being someone who was around longer, closer to the time period that I grew up to, that you could probably remember also, or more deeply than what Chris and I have talked about, remember in the 90s, I remember like very vividly as a kid, there was an infatuation with ufology. MUFON was like such a weird concept that was out there. And you had the X Files. Everybody was obsessed with the X Files. And it felt like anytime there was a news article or a news coverage or something about UFOs, the air got really heavy. And then look at where we are now, 30 plus years later. Who would have ever thought that we would have panels in Congress, like discussions about disclosure?
I don't even know where to start because so many ideas and answers just popped into my head. First of all, Aliens equals the greatest movie of all time. That's the first thing I'm going to say. So 1986, that's the first thing that jumps into my head. I'm sure it is yours as well. James Cameron's 1986 Aliens with Sigourney Weaver, the greatest movie of all time. I mean, bar none. Just agree with me, and then we'll have a happy rest of the session.
I agree with you, man.
Absolutely love that movie, like beyond words. So here's Lord of the Rings, Chris, and here's Aliens. I mean, it's higher. Lord of the Rings just it's a longer commitment too. But and then you have Alien 3, which I just don't even want to talk about. You know, I'll never forget growing up also as a little kid watching Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It's a really calm movie, but there are some terrifying scenes in it of abduction, particularly one of a little boy. And when they come at the end, it's just this festival of lights, and they're absolutely gorgeous to look at. And the mothership comes down, and it's more like a Alien Contact, you know, First Contact movie. I love that movie. I love the movie Contact with what's her name? Now she played Nell. I can't remember her name now. Anyway, I love the movie Contact. And so she is researching with SETI and with the VLA arrays in New Mexico, the antenna dish. Jodie Foster.
Jodie Foster, yeah.
That's a great movie. I love the movie Fire in the Sky. It's just, you know, it was purported to be a hoax, the kidnapping of Travis Walton. But at the end, I don't care. The end, the last 15 minutes of that movie are absolutely terrifying. Aboard the ship when he goes under the alien knife and the probe, and he's naked, and they've got him strapped down, and then he's just like, they're gonna put something in his eye, and they mush that gunk down his throat. It's a terrifying last 15 minutes of any movie, way up there. I like Aliens. I like the concept of aliens. I like the notion that, again, I don't mean to, you know, to return to this if it's controversial, but as a Christian, I believe God is ultimately creative, you know, and he could have made aliens. There could be another
Sure,
planet
yeah.
out there that has aliens on there. I mean, be kind of cool.
Yeah.
I hope they're
We've had
friendly.
that conversation. Yeah, we've had that conversation many times, so don't feel bad about sharing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I get asked all the time when I hold a booth at a vendor market or a craft fair and I'm signing books and selling them. I have banners that clearly say alien invasion. And yet, without a doubt and without exception, these guys come up because sometimes you're down in, like, you know, the inner city and you get all kinds of colorful characters there. And these people come up to my booth and they're like, yeah, man, I was abducted back in the 80s. They did all these things on me. I could tell you all about it. And I've got all these people that are wandering by who might be potential buyers of my book. And I'm going, come back, come back. You know, this guy's hogging up my time with his alien theories. I
Oh,
just
man.
don't I don't know if any of that has happened, but I do believe in the existence of that's why we have disclosure. I do believe in the existence of Area 51. I do believe that we've been visited. I'm not sure if aliens are in fact aliens or if they are in fact spectral extraterrestrial beings who are from another dimension, not
Mhm.
necessarily flesh and bone, but from another dimension. I don't know. It'll all be made known in time, I guess. I just hope they're not Gorgons because, dude,
We'd be screwed.
yeah, we would be.
Yeah.
You bring up a good point, and you know, I've said on the podcast multiple times, I'm Catholic, grew up Catholic, not the best Catholic, but I try.
Good job.
And Dean and I were guests on the Paranormal Rundown podcast. That question came up about the concept of aliens and God. And I brought up the point that God and aliens can exist because it would be, what's the word I'm looking for? The hubris of humanity to think that we are the center of everything.
Hmm.
We are not the center of everything. You
Or
look
the
at
only beings out there.
the only
That was the
being.
central message of the Contact movie. Is like there's a line from that movie that says, "If we are the only ones out there, it'd be an awful waste of space."
That. And who says that on another planet that God being the ultimate creator of the universe, like, let's go down that path, right? And who says God didn't create multiple civilizations, multiple alien beings in which they had their own version of some sort of messenger? Like,
Yeah.
that's always within the realm of possibility. So, but one thing I'll say is my biggest fear is, being eaten by an alien. And you just happen to put that in your book. Dean and I have talked about that
Oh man.
multiple times. Like, what if the worst case scenario, these aliens come and we are their food source?
Yep.
Like that.
Well,
Yeah.
do you remember V? Do you remember V from the 80s?
I don't
No, I don't.
recall. No.
They redid it. They redid it in the late 90s or the early 2000s. It's a mini series, just the letter V, and it stood for visitors. But the original, I'm always going to go to the original. I'm a child of the 80s, so anything in the 80s, they're actually remaking the Never-Ending Story, which just drives me up the wall because the one in the 80s, don't do that to me again with Artax. Don't do it. I remember it well enough. But they got to remake everything. There's nothing new under the sun. V was really all about that. V was very similar to Independence Day, or I should say that vice versa. Independence Day, the arrival of the ships was very similar to the arrival of the ships in V, so there's a natural parallel there. But the hidden agenda for the aliens, the visitors in V, was to take our water and take our food, and the food was humans. So this is not it's not unlike that in that respect. But if you boil it down to just for its simplest terms, we're scared of a lion eating us. We're scared of a bear eating us. We're scared of whatever, some other predator, a cheetah or something eating us because a velociraptor, Jurassic Park. We're scared of that naturally, of being predated upon. And so it just happens to be something from outer space this time. It's just another predator, really.
So okay, so here's I'll say one thing about the terrifying aspect about the universe for me. I think it's almost infinitely scarier to think about the concept that the universe is empty and we are the only ones of conscious in existence, because I've heard this argument in the scientific community before, where the the requirements for life could be so ultra rare that it really could take the size of the universe as we know at 13 billion years old, as far as it could take that size just to have the randomness kind of order itself in a way that gets to conscious awareness. That I'm not saying I believe in that. I'm just saying that idea scares the shit out of me more than having a universe filled with other conscious beings that maybe a million years evolved beyond us and have like nefarious intentions with us if they ever found us. I think it's
Yeah.
scarier that we could be alone. That's the first thing I'll say. The second thing is I also kind of take the stance in the idea, like the real life concept of aliens, where if they are so evolved to be able to travel interstellarly, which is what it would require, even interdimensionally, like you said, if there are beings that are here celestially, or not celestial, but like they're kind of like spectral. I think that if they have reached that state, or they've reached a level of intelligence and evolution to where they can travel interstellarly, I don't think they would need to take any resources from us. Like, wouldn't they just be able to like create their own
We
endless amount of resources,
that
or even
that
need food anymore?
Yeah, it's a
Right?
really good
Like,
question. It's a really good question.
so,
I had to wrestle with that in volume 4, Relentless, which is the sequel
oh,
to the
okay.
series. Why would they come? And there is definitely a reason why they came. Granted, if there's a shortage
Interesting.
of natural resources on their planet, they're going to look elsewhere. They're going to look for another planet. That's a concern that we have. Our
Right.
natural resources dwindling. That's
Mhm.
a concern that, and we would probably do the same thing.
Yeah, at this state in our evolution, if we had the power to go take the resources from another planet, we probably would. I wouldn't doubt
Yeah.
that for a second. Um,
Americans would do that, I'm sure, the American Empire. On that note, though, honestly, boy, it's just kind of the default assumption that if aliens visited us, that they would attack right away, that there would be something
right.
nefarious about them because we fear what we don't understand.
Yeah.
And we assume and we apply nefarious motive to anything we don't understand until it's kind of guilty until proven innocent. So if these things showed up, what we often see in pop culture, in media, in books, TV, movies, is the arrival and the instant attack, the annihilation of man that just commences right away. There's no warning. And so I just didn't want that. I didn't want that in my series. I wanted it to be, here these things are, and they are hovering over us and effectively bringing all of this ominous dread, because we simply don't know, are you friend or foe? Are you going to
Mm,
stay? Are you going to go? What do you want? What are you doing up there?
right.
And why are there so many of you? And could you please answer our questions? Information is power. There was no information, and so we were powerless. And that really contributed to a state of weakness in the volume zero revelation where they arrive.
I think another awesome point about your book that you wrote, that you crafted in that story, was the idea that there were a lot of people who thought they were angelic. I think if something really like happened like that in real life, you would get the same response. You would, I think you're absolutely spot on. I think there would be a lot of like suicides. I think that the market would crash instantly, like as soon as there was any kind of like tangible exposure or
Hmm.
disclosure or anything like that, where people could actually see a spaceship or the indescribable, it would tank the world economy, at least temporarily. Like,
Yeah.
people would stay. It would be like COVID times 100. Of course, if the aliens didn't interact with us right away, then you would have the quintessential, like just like your story, where people would panic and then they would kind of like, well, maybe they're here for good purposes. And then we kind of just at that point cross our fingers and hope that, like they really are, like more so like the movie Contact and less like your series where they just eat the shit out of us.
Well, hope is the one thing. If you go back to the Hunger Games with President Snow talking to Katniss Everdeen, hope is the one thing stronger than fear that can't be killed. And hope is what carries everyone on in a post-apocalyptic environment, whether it's Dissonance, whether it's my new novel series, The End, which deals with the end times. It is
Okay.
the one thing that carries us forward, even in the face of great odds. When all the
Yeah.
odds are stacked against us, it's the one thing that we cling to. Maybe it'll be okay. Without hope, you just circle the drain. Without hope,
Yeah.
you give up. And so
Yeah.
it's the hope that carries us forward.
Before we run out of time, I wanted to quickly pivot to AI and your
Oh
thoughts
boy, here we
Oh,
on
go.
yes, yes, yeah, that
AI,
too, right?
Aaron, because Dean and I have had multiple episodes on AI. And I think, Dean, our previous episode that we did on AI was kind of me bitching about Sora, the video AI generator,
And how
and
shitty it
deep
is, yeah.
fakes, and not how shitty it is, but how dangerous it could potentially
Oh,
be
yeah,
as it
yeah, that
continually gets refined. But I wanted to
right.
know your thoughts on AI.
Man, oh geez. The only positive sentiment that comes out of AI for me is my wife actually saying that you gave up AI for AI. So I gave up artificial intelligence for alien invasion. And so I love that. I think that helps me kind of, keep things in perspective a little bit. So I mentioned earlier I'm a voiceover artist. Voiceovers, like many creative industries, is under attack right now by AI. And it was almost like the flipping of a switch happened on January 1st, 2024. Up until that time, things were going fine with voiceovers. It's a very lucrative career if you get in and you do well and you get coaching and have great demos and you produce. Right now, I'm the voice of United Healthcare. So, and that's a whole nother story with what happened with Luigi Mangione and the assassination of the CEO. But ultimately, it's been very lucrative for a long time. This is a 900 square foot shop that's been converted into, 2/3 playroom, rec room, 1/3 office and studio. And I did all that with voiceover money. Bought a van with voiceover money. We pay our mortgage with voiceover money. I'm sincerely grateful for what voiceovers has brought, but AI is steadily and certifiably chipping away at the foundations every single day. It is a wave of erosion that just keeps coming back in on the shore. People are wanting to save money. I absolutely understand that. But what they do is they will opt for software such as Speechelo or Speech Ocean or any of these things that you can, simply drop in your text, have it spit out a humanoid voice that doesn't have any of the idiosyncrasies of the human voice or the new subtle nuances that we can bring, and they'll pay $49 and call it good and put that up for a commercial. Whereas, this commercial maybe for a national TV run for a year would have paid me, upwards of $3,000. I get that you want to save that money, but man, it's really harming the industry. I've seen the quality of jobs go down. I've seen the quantity of jobs go down. And it's been very, very harmful to the industry. It's eroded our income. I don't have any love for AI. I do have a note at the beginning of every single one of my books that says it's called Note on AI, and it addresses the fact that I published these quickly. I realize some people will then suspect that I've used AI. I will never do that. Not for idea generation, not for creation, not for editing. I have other people, if they want to do it to help visualize characters and create artwork, that I can go, okay, sure, yeah, Bassett may look like that. That's great. I'll let them do that, but I don't create anything with AI. I think it's just, it has its benefits, and it can help people in the medical field, for example, but it is seriously doing a lot of harm to the creative industry for a lot of sub industries within the creative industry.
I'm going to be the reason you get super pissed off today. I just know it. There's a company, I can't remember its name. You could probably find it really easily. I remember reading about it like a month or two ago, that they vowed in 2025, which, we're finally in 2025 now. They vowed that by the end of 2025, they will have generated 6,000 fully AI generated creative novels. And basically, what this company is doing is they're taking a small amount of people who are professional at stacking artificial intelligence and tweaking it and feeding it the right information. And they probably have some editors working for them to make sure things, are spit out correctly. And that's it. Like, they have a small team. They're probably funded for millions, if not more, tens, hundreds of millions, or not, maybe not hundreds, but like tens of millions of dollars, funded from either open source or venture capitalists or somebody in the tech industry. And it's essentially them spitting out something that might have a return on investment for them in the hundreds of times, because but that's what they're saying. They think that they can craft 6,000 novels, creative novels, by the end of this year, and turn that into a big lucrative company. Let's see if it actually happens. But like, have you heard about stuff like that, Aaron? Have you heard about things like that happening, where companies are trying to use AI to have creative writing in small degrees?
Ultimately, no, I haven't heard of that. However, as a writer, as an author, and someone who is deeply involved in the writing community, I admin a 32,000 or 31,000 member authors group on Facebook, and co-admin two others representing about 50 grand. That sounded monetarily. 50,000 people. The consensus is usually the same in those groups. There's a lot of vitriol directed towards these people who, and you never really know who they are. They will go to Chat GPT, they'll throw in a few prompts, they'll say, tell me a story. I mean, something as simple as that. And it'll create this story for them, fraught with characters and rises and falls and this and that. It's going to have errors. AI does. AI can't get hands right, for example. A lot of things that it gets wrong. Then they'll have OpenAI or whatever, I don't know the tools that they use, create a cover. They'll slap that together. They throw it on Amazon, and boom, they're a capitalist. So people are using and abusing AI to just, in the name of profit, to create things like that. You have a dilution of the value of the market when people do that. Hopefully, people will continue to be vigilant, readers will continue to be vigilant and savvy enough to detect the difference between something that's, generative AI and something that is, unique human creation. I think it's just for an author, granted, there's the capitalists out there and they're going to do what they're going to do. But for an author to resort to that, you are surrendering and relinquishing the greatest gift that you've been given, and that mirrors God himself, the ability to create. You're surrendering that. And I find it really, really tacky and a shame that people would do that.
Well, I think in the short run, I think it's going to be pretty easy for most people to tell, or at least have authors try to, like you've been doing, assure people that you're not using AI and stuff. Because I think that there is inherently going to be like a pushback in the community about using AI to write because just doesn't feel the same. It's the same with the voiceover stuff, in my opinion. It's
Yes.
like, the nuances and the deliverables that come from the understanding of how the wordplay is supposed to sound and the progression of the story. Like we're not at a point where AI can do that yet. In the same way that AI cannot just spit out like another Lord of the Rings or another, Dissonance series. So this reminds me of, if you look back in, like, say, the 70s and 80s and stuff, when science fiction and horror movies, they were really using individuals' creativity to do mastery of makeup and artistry and special effects and stuff like that. And a good example is Tom Savini from he was made famous from Dawn of the Dead. He's been out there for a long time, and he's done some really amazing creative artistry for movies. But of course, even though there was still a desire to have that sort of thing in the movie for uh, posterity, and just for the sake of having it in a cult classic kind of way, he kind of got edged out, or that kind of idea of traditional makeup work and special effects work got edged out by CGI. And I think that someday we're probably going to see that happen with
Hmm.
AI. Like, I think the market's just going to get overrun. Maybe it's like 5 years, maybe it's 10, 20 years, but unfortunately, I just get that sense. I mean, do you get that sense too, Aaron?
I
Like,
do.
that eventually it's going to happen?
I do.
Yeah.
Well, it's happening now, quite frankly, and there's nothing that we can really do about it other than just continue to put out good quality product, good quality services. I've been a narrator for I almost wanted to say the company's name, but I don't want to out them. A company who does CGM devices. They are really well renowned. We've got CGM devices that people use the world over, and it's good. It's good equipment. It's good quality equipment that people use to keep their glucose levels down. They've used me forever to narrate their explainer videos and all the things that they have online as far as blogs and other helpful information for people who want to get healthy. And they changed to AI. Just one day said, you know what, we're gonna have an AI narrator. Sorry, it's been fun working with you, and take care. And that provided dozens and dozens and dozens of $1,000 worth of work for me that is now gone. That's my side of it. On the flip side, I also work with creatives who they have been pushed out of a job because their parent company or their studio is now using AI for this particular creation, and they're an extraneous type of support in that workflow. So whatever they do is replaceable, and that I think that's just the key, is you have to make yourself unreplaceable. I love the line from Oscar Wilde. That's something I quote often: be yourself, everyone else is already taken. The more cloney, not George, but cloney you are, get it? I don't know if you saw what I did there.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, no, no. George Clooney. Yeah. Yeah.
don't be a Clooney or a cloney. The more of a clone you are, and the easier you are to replace, it's going to happen. So make yourself a standout, make yourself unique, publish and create and write brilliantly unique stuff to the very best effort that you can.
Yeah. That's great advice. We would love to hear more about your newest work, The End. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, grateful. I mean, I just love talking about it. It's funny to be talking about something other than to talk about a series in a context other than Dissonance, because Dissonance has just so dominated my life. And that's the big kahuna. I mean, this is 6 books of Dissonance. Right now, I mean, foreseeably, I've got 3 books planned for The End. It's volume 1, Alpha, volume 2, Omicron, and doesn't have anything to do with the virus, and volume 3, Omega. And so it very closely mirrors the end times, Armageddon, Revelation. It very closely mirrors that. It is not a carbon copy in any respect of Revelation. It's going to have its own twists and turns. It's going to have its own different iterations of evil that are, rising to the fore, and the protagonists have to deal with. But I was admittedly very inspired in the 90s, I believe is when it came out, by the Left Behind series. And I loved that series. It fictionalizes real end time events as predicted in Revelation by the Apostle John on the island of Patmos. That's where he was banished, and where he wrote Revelation. And so, there have been dramatizations made up of the Left Behind series starring Kirk Cameron. I've never seen any of them. I've loved the books, but I've never seen any of those movies. I'm really excited about the prospects of this. One, because I'm back in a series again. Yay! I love being in a series. They have somewhere long to go. It's not just a one-off book, meaning no disrespect to something like Forecast as a singular novel. But that's one, back in the series. Two, post-apocalyptic. That's where I belong. I like writing in those settings of just going nowhere but up, and the odds are so greatly stacked against you. Three, I'm a Christian. This is Christian material. This is Christian fiction that is something that I really felt like I had to stop after Dissonance and Forecast and my kids' books. And I had to question, am I supposed to write Christian fiction, Lord? I don't know. I mean, it's been done, and I don't know. I want to write something epic, so I can't write something that is just bubblegummy tripe. I need to write something that is colossal. And so it's taking that shape right now. I have 89 pages of volume 1 written, and I'm super excited of where it's going. What happens is a paranoid delusional. Well, let me set the stage again. So we have a virus that has wiped out 50% of the world's population. So in that respect, it is similar stage setting to Dissonance. No aliens, of course. Sorry, Chris. But at least this time you won't be, an entree. No one wants to be an entree. I should have bumper stickers. No one wants to be an entree. So the stage is set for someone to rise through all this cataclysm and give people hope, lead them to a sense of it's all going to be okay, when really that person is a wolf in sheep's clothing. And so we have taken to that person. They're a techno trillionaire. It's not a referendum on 24 or 25 rather. It's not a referendum on Elon Musk by any stretch. It's a paranoid delusional psychotic who happens to be a techno trillionaire, has military grade equipment at his disposal in a contract with the military. Everything went south. He's still got it. And his original name is Constantine Jedediah Goodfellow, and he becomes president. So in the wake of this virus leveling humanity, Constantine means steadfast, Jedediah means loved of the Lord, and Goodfellow means good fellow, good person. He actually reveals who he really is, antichristally. He reveals who he really is, and he changes his name to Nero, and that has implications for Christians based on what happened in first century with Emperor Nero and the burning of Rome and persecution of Christians. Yeah.
Biggest asshole. I
Yeah.
have
I
a
mean,
particular hate for Nero and Caligula, but I'll digress.
I should incorporate Caligula. Maybe I'll change the second novel from Omicron to Caligula. We'll see. Yeah, it's basically a post-apocalypse. The man is delusional and the delusions of grandeur, and so he thinks he's the Antichrist. He wants to be the Antichrist. He wants to usher in and bring about the conquest of Satan. He wants to, jumpstart this Armageddon war between God and Satan, and he's not the Antichrist. He just has delusions of grandeur, and so the world is basically under control of a tyrant, and they have to find their way out of there. That's kind of where the protagonists are set. But I love the title, The End. I love the fact that as I was researching this, I couldn't find anything that was on the same scale as the Left Behind series in terms of Christian fiction or religious fiction or anything like that. So I'm looking forward to this to see if it'll rank well and do well.
That sounds really interesting and fascinating. Just your works in general that you have out there and you're planning on creating and releasing, right up my alley. I'm super excited to start listening to Dissonance. So Aaron, we've had you here for a little bit over an hour. We really appreciate your time and coming on the show. Dean,
My pleasure.
Before we wrap up today, do you have any final questions for Aaron?
I do have one that I just want to jump back to for a second because I'm just curious. Have you ever seen a UFO? Have you ever had a UFO encounter?
I've never had a UFO encounter. I have seen things in the sky that you wonder are a UFO, but I think everybody's done that.
Oh,
and then I've thrown my son's frisbee, thrown it really hard and high, and then taken pictures of it. And so I mean,
yeah.
I suppose I can
Nice.
actually take those and maybe fool somebody else. But the only real experience I've had with UFOs with interaction with them is my DJI drone. Because when it gets way high up there and it's really tiny and it's far away, It's like, hey, that's unidentified. I don't know if that's my drone or not. It could be somebody else's.
There you
So
go.
we'll see.
Once again, Aaron, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. It was a pleasure speaking with you today.
Yeah,
It was
my
great
pleasure.
hearing about all of your works and your thoughts on AI and aliens, and also your love for Lord of the Rings as well. So that's a plus on my book,
Woohoo!
which means you are welcome back anytime. If you didn't like Lord of the Rings, it would have been a clean break from here. But
Is that the bar for entry then? Is like Lord of
yeah,
the Rings, check, you're in. Okay, got
yeah, absolutely. That's gonna be the first question for every guest moving forward.
it. Or do you like the Ring of Power? If so, then you're not allowed in.
That too. Or you can lie about it and never bring it up.
Right.
But Aaron, why don't you tell the people where they can find you, what's their social media, how they could get a hold of you, and how they could get a hold of your books?
Yeah, this is my favorite question. So the first thing I want to say is I have a website that is my primary author website, and it is authoraaronryan.com. Not to be confused with awfulaaronryan.com. That's different. But I clarified that so much. I've done all these interviews over the years that I was like, I think I'm just going to buy awfulaaronryan.com as just a joke and forward it to author Aaron Ryan. So now you can go to both. You can go to awfulaaronryan.com and it'll forward you to the actual site. Yay, problem solved. So there's that one. You can go to dissonancetheseries.com. That is for the Dissonance hexalogy of 6 books. That's a little hard to say and remember. People always think I'm saying dissident. So an easier way to make it memorable is just go to getthesebooks.com. And getthesebooks.com will take you to the Dissonance site. And then the third website is thisisnottheend.com. And so that is my third website that is devoted to the End trilogy. So authoraaronryan.com, getthesebooks.com, or thisisnottheend.com. And all of them bring you to moi.
You heard them, listeners. Go check him out. Go check out his books. And Aaron, I do hope your screenplay gets picked up by some sort of studio or streaming service so we can actually see a live action Dissonance at some
Me
point in the
too.
future.
Me too,
All right.
man. More than I can even say.
Yeah. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to reading your books, man. We really appreciate you coming on today's show. Listeners, we hope you enjoyed today's show. And once again, go ahead, check out Aaron's stuff. Go ahead, if he's on social media, go ahead and give him a follow. Thank you so much for listening to today's show. Hope you enjoyed today's conversation.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks for tuning into today's episode of The Wandering Road. You can find us on Apple, Google, Spotify, and most podcast platforms. Be sure to subscribe and share. Also, don't forget to give a follow on Instagram at twroadpodcast and follow my TikTok at twrpodcast. Take care, and I'll catch you on the next one.